I met Rishad probably going back, I think maybe 5 years, and then had a chance to listen to him speak publicly about 3 years ago. And in my opinion, there are just very few people who are able to articulate what happens at the intersection of culture and collaboration and technology. And I think one of the reasons is, in addition to Rishad's very astute observation and communication skills, is that he's in a very interesting place in terms of where he works. So part of his job is working with some of the biggest brands in the world as they try and navigate what it means to be a brand in an environment where people can talk back to you and have new expectations of you. And at the same time, he's working with very small startups like Recycle Bank, for example, who are trying to rethink from the ground up what organizations should look like and what role they should play and how they should communicate. And so I hope you enjoy hearing from Rishad. I'd like to welcome him, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. So in the next 30 or 35 minutes, I'm going to speak about this particular topic, which is the future does not fit in the containers of the past, and the future does not fit in the mindsets of the past. So I'll let you know how much I hate change, just as a starting point, okay? So a lot of people say change is good for you, and we're living in good, in changing times, and isn't that particularly fascinating? And if you are relatively happy, change sucks, okay? Change is only good if you are unhappy. And the reason change sucks is because you don't know what you're doing when times are changing. And when you are successful and you are senior within an organization, you do not want to basically appear as stupid as you really think and you know you are. And so changing times are actually times when very, very senior and successful people are most scared. So one of the most important things that I would like to talk to you about is that in revolutionary times, the first people that lose their heads are not the king and the queen. It's a lot of the people who are trying to incite the revolution. So if you think about how many people actually died in the French Revolution, we keep talking about the kings and the queens, but there were many, 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 many tens of thousands of others before. And you all are basically simultaneously leaders in your field, so you all are the kings and queens, but you all are the kings and queens of a new revolution. And therefore, you'll have to be both enthusiastic as well as somewhat concerned. I'm going to speak to both ends. Because it's in our best interest that you all stay alive. And not that anybody can crush you all, but not just you all stay alive, but you all thrive. Because I don't believe business can succeed without the skill sets of the people in this room and many other people in companies that, companies, firms, individuals who exist. So 2 minutes about what I end up doing. I have worked, when I talk about change, I worked for the same boss for 11 years. My contract basically says if he goes, I can go. All right? I have worked in the same company for 30 years. I have worked or lived in the same neighborhood in Chicago for 32 years. And I met my wife when she and I were 12. I'm in charge of change, and I hate it. And I'll get back to that at the end as to why that's something that everybody needs to keep in mind, because sometimes people get hyper excited, and when someone gets hyper excited, we sometimes lose the plot as to what's going on. So now let me make the case for change, even though I hate the stuff, okay? the way we explain change to our clients is we do not talk about the internet. Because if we talk about the internet, it's not something that they really want to get. Because I've been working in the digital space since 1993. And if people wanted to get it, they would have got it in 1994, 5, 6, 7, 8. They are getting it now because they are forced to get it, not because they want to get it. And usually, if someone is forced to do something, they will do it grudgingly. If they want to do something, they will do it particularly well. So we explain it as the connection engine. So we speak to them in our company and we say, we're living in an age of the external connection engine. And the external connection engine is more powerful than the last big thing that actually has occurred in civilization, which isn't the printing press, which is actually a small idea. It's the internal combustion engine, was the big idea. Because the internal combustion engine changed society. The internal combustion engine changed which countries succeeded and which did not. And because the West embraced the steam engine and a whole bunch of other things, countries like the United Kingdom, the United States thrived, and countries like China and others did not. And this was long before the communists. So the first really is, this is about connections, the external connection engine, and connections are where, because people are connecting to share, they're connecting to transact, they're connecting to discover, and they're connecting to express themselves, which automatically means, hey, by the way, you have to pay attention, because if you're a CEO, CFO, CMO, whatever, you can't say the internet or technology is somebody else's business. People happen to be your business. Now, we've taken the conversation from one of zeros and ones to something much more exciting for these folks. The second is we sort of explain that we're also living in an age of digital leakage, which does not mean that all of us who are digitally savvy have to go to the bathroom badly. It basically means that when something becomes digital, plus you have this connection engine, it tends to bleed between categories. So the example I use, even though it's somewhat old, but these were, think about this when I was predicting this 3-4 years in advance, not like afterwards. When the iPhone came out, I sort of used Mary Meeker's slide. Mary Meeker had a slide called I Not a Phone. And I Not a Phone is not because AT&T does not work in New York City, but I Not a Phone is because it really isn't a phone. And that you could see 4 years ago. And I said, this thing is going to like hurt a lot of industries that are in the adjoining areas. So let's see what it has done to the ends. Nokia, we all know what it did to Nokia. But recognize that Nokia also had the horrible mistake of buying a company called Navteq for $6.2 billion, which is mapping software. When you have Google Maps on an Android or an iPhone, why the hell do you need Navteq? Or why the hell do you need Garmin? Nintendo, its stock price is at a 52-week low. Angry Birds on iPhone is better than anything that you can play on DS. Nikon, the best camera is the one that you have with you. The new iPhone 4S has a higher resolution than 2 years ago or 3 years ago D100. And that's just the ends. That's digital leakage, which therefore makes me speak to our clients and say, the opportunities and threats to your business do not come from your current competitors. The opportunities and the threats come from the people that you least expect. And one of those people that you least expect is new ways of working. And however much you may want to laugh at it, it's similar to how Nokia laughed at the iPhone and Nintendo didn't even know what was going to come and hit it. And that wakes them up, because every one of these clients are very interested in the most valuable company in the world. And they say, okay, that's interesting. So that's digital leakage. The third is what we call the people's network. So we don't call it the social network, because the reality of it is, I'll make a case that Facebook has got nothing to do with being social. Facebook has got a lot to do with two things. It's basically a way to show off, which is actually somewhat antisocial. And Facebook is actually a content distribution engine, where today the main content happens to be photographs. 62% of the time people spend is on photographs. Looking, lurking, and sharing photographs. And so one of the key things I ask everybody to do is don't believe what you read, because almost everybody who writes this stuff hasn't had enough time to think about what they're writing about. They just write it. But use it. I mean, I've done all kinds of experiments on Facebook. I could put some of the most poetic thoughts and nobody cares. I could put a dumbass photograph and it gets liked and commented on. It's a visual thing. Pinterest just took that to the next extreme. Because photographs are the currency that we deal with, because we've stopped learning words. And it also is a global language. And today you're seeing that with music, where, with Spotify and other kinds of stuff. So really it's a content distribution network. But the key thing I think about is the people's network. And the people's network is all of us who are connecting to each other because of the connection engine. And the interesting thing with the people's network is it takes it away from what we consider to be rather silly, where people basically say, can you tell us what our Facebook strategy is? Because I kind of asked them, you never asked me for what your Meredith strategy was, or your Hearst strategy was, or your NBC strategy was. Why do you believe that you need to have a Facebook strategy? You need to have a strategy for people connecting to people, of which, by the way, Facebook is going to be a dominant player. But don't make your strategy on Facebook, because if you make your strategy on Facebook, who the hell knows? I mean, today I don't know whether Pinterest is a bubble or not, but there comes Pinterest from nowhere, right? And what about Twitter? And what happens when people begin to realize that maybe Google Plus will make more money than Facebook? Monetize. I'm not necessarily talking about, other kinds of things. So then people say, okay, that's interesting. Now, once you have people network, it comes into the way of how do you reconsider work? And how do you reconsider marketing? People have always said that word of mouth has always been a big thing. Yes, it has, but there's a big difference today versus what word of mouth used to be. Word of mouth in the past was completely unscalable. So it was you and me talking with a few friends. And if we were somewhat lucky, we would make such a noise that somebody in the press would cover us. But today, because of the people's network, word of mouth scales, and that's all the difference. When something scales, it matters to business. When something does not scale, it matters to art. I love art. I get paid because of business. And the key thing that is very, very important is how does this scale impact business? And the people's network is about scale. And it's about people connecting to each other. But it's in three different ways. The first way is it's obviously people telling each other. But the second is people helping each other. And the third is people working together, which is not even helping each other, but working together to solve things. And whether that's in all of those three could, Kickstarter would do all those three. There are a lot of other people, would do some of the Lego examples, clearly do at least two of the three. But it is that. So it's when you start thinking about, okay, people talking to each other, people working together, people helping each other, what does that mean for business? Well, let me give you a couple of thoughts of what it means for business and as to why business is now scared shitless about what's happening, but they won't say it. What they'll say is, we have a Facebook strategy. When they should really think about, wait a second, this thing doesn't fit in the way we've organized ourselves. Like, for instance, something as simple as, crowdsourcing. And, John Windsor from Victors and Spoils is here, folks from Javoto are here, Bastian. It freaks out every major creative agency in the United States. And I happen to have 3, 4 of them in our world. Not exactly in our world, but somewhere in our world. And they basically believe that if you talk about people like that, it's like the devil has entered our kingdom. The reality of it is, it's not the devil, it's the way a big part of the future, not the only part of the future, and you need to sort of embrace it. But let me explain to you really why this is a big deal. Not necessarily just crowdsourcing, but this whole idea of how people are connecting to each other. So the first, which is pretty formidable, is marketing has always been about heavy users. You name any category, and I can give you a statistic. The statistic will be 20% of the users account for 60% of the sales and 80% of the profits. Pretty much any category. That's true. So therefore, marketers have focused on the heavy user. That's who they care about. Now here comes the real trick here. They have believed that the heavy user is the same thing as the heavy influencer. Not true. Heavy user is defined by product usage. Heavy influencer is defined by charisma and network size. There is an intersection between the two, but they're somewhat different. But more interestingly, within the heavy influencer, there are 2 types of heavy influencers. There is an advocate and there is a detractor. So an advocate is somebody who loves you, and a detractor is somebody who hates you. Problem is that the detractors are 4 times more likely to speak than the advocates. Think about it when you get pissed off. Are you likely to speak then, or when you are blissfully well satisfied? So now what happens is, the heavy detractor is unlikely to be a heavy user unless they're a masochist. Therefore, if you don't talk to your heavy detractors, or don't engage with your heavy detractors, or don't defang your heavy detractors, marketing to your heavy users won't be good enough. So the people's network has changed who you're targeting all of a sudden completely. Here's a second shift. Marketing has always been about telling people things. Long before even people's network came around, people were marketing to themselves. They were marketing to themselves by going to websites, reading reviews, searching on things. Now what's begun to happen is they are sharing with friends, they're comparing things. And so marketing has been outsourced to the end user. If you're thinking about crowdsourcing, marketing has gone to the end user. I'm waiting for somebody to figure out that the CMO is the wrong title, and they should go from Chief Marketing Officer to Chief Facilitation Officer. How do you facilitate self-marketing? Which is, how do you use what people are saying about your brand and push it forward? So that's the theory. The next section is the practice, which is what are we doing within our organization. And then at the end, I'm going to talk to you about the problems, okay, with some solutions. But unfortunately, once you start it, you begin to realize there's some problems. So we saw this, and in order to basically be really, really cheap, my company has me doing 4 jobs globally. They should have 4 different people doing it, but they've decided they have 1 person doing it. 2 of them are not even in my title, so I only talk to the 2 that are in my title, which is Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer. And if you actually think about it, you have to be like mentally insane to have the same title with strategy and innovation. Because strategy is about future competitive advantage, and it's about mathematical rigor, and it's about left brain bullshit. Innovation is about fresh, insightful connections. It's about challenging the status quo, and it's like, how would you think about the world if you were on drugs? Okay. I'm the only person that I know is the Chief Strategy and the Chief Innovation Officer. So I'm absolutely convinced it's a 2-for-1 cost savings measure. Okay. But I have helped design, with our board of directors, the strategy for a lot of companies. And our overall strategy, which I'll share with you, because the other stuff people say is like, you're sharing everything. I said, like, what age are you living in? I said, it isn't a question of the strategy, it's a question of whether we can do it. it's not the strategy itself. So our strategy and the companies that are within sort of our purview are the two largest media communication brands in the world, which are Starcom, MediaVest Group, and Zenith Optimedia, which are actually 4 of them. And between them, they place about $75 billion of advertising around the world. It's not trivial. It's about 22% of all the advertising that's placed in the world. We also have the 2 largest digital agencies in the world in Razorfish and Digitas. And then we have a bunch of other things, small companies like Denu, larger companies like Performix, a company like Big Fuel. 22,000 employees, 76 countries. Here's our strategy. So we had all of these people inside VivaKi, but we didn't know how they would work together. So it starts off with one simple line. What do clients want? Because we are eventually in the business of clients, right? Clients want ideas, simply and efficiently delivered across paid, owned, and earned connections. That's simple. The first word is ideas, odd. That's the first one. Simply and efficiently. Simply means, please stop the melodrama. Every one of our agencies believes that they're in the soap opera business, as far as I can tell. Okay, drama, massive drama. Forget about working with outsiders. Massive drama working with each other. Efficiently. Efficiency is not just about price, which there is something. It's about speed. We're living in an age of rapid innovation. You've got to be moving fast. So we're talking about speed. The third, which is delivered. So ideas simply and efficiently delivered. This is where things become very remarkable. None of my clients want something that doesn't scale. They'll do an experiment, but they eventually will say, can you scale this? Don't do anything. Some people will do it for a press release and buzz, but really the very senior, smart people will say, is this scalable? I'm not just doing it for like a nice little experiment. Can you show me that it can potentially scale? Across paid, owned, and earned, which we know of. But now I'm going to give you something about paid, owned, and earned, which is somewhat opposite to what people believe. Our belief is in many ways the future is first about owned. Owned is what a company has in product, service, talent, employees, people. In a world of people's network, when somebody says, I want positive buzz for my advertising, my answer is shoot yourself. Okay? Why do you want your advertising to be talked about? You should want your product and service to be talked about, not your advertising. And do you know how you can get your product and service talked about? By providing a superior product or service. And do you know how you're going to fund providing a superior product and service? Maybe you want to cut your marketing budget. Because if you have a great owned asset, you will then have people talking about it positively, which will be an earned asset. And then you use your advertising to put that on steroids. You take that earned stuff, which is genuine, and you pump it up through your advertising. So it's not paid, owned, earned, it's owned, earned, paid. Our belief is in the next 5 years, and I'm giving you a number for scale. Neither of the two numbers are correct because I haven't been able to compute them, but I'll just give you for percentage scale. I would say for most marketers today, about 75% of their money would be paid, 20%, maybe 15, 20% may be owned, and maybe 5%, if that, would be earned. So it's 75-25. I anticipate that'll probably go to 55-45 in the next 5 years. That is dramatic. It's a dramatic shift. And that is pretty remarkable. And so what we've now said, the only way to do that, idea simply paid, owned, and earned, is no one company can do it all. So our strategy is built on no one company can do it all, which is rather strange for people who've worked with our company. Most of our companies believe and are run by little Napoleons and Napoleonesses, who basically believe that all that they survey is their own. The problem is I have to keep informing them that Napoleon lost. And I work for a French company, so it must be pretty remarkable. And why did Napoleon lose? Because the idiot started opening up the Russian front. He hadn't yet beaten the English, and he went and hit the Russian front. In an age of the connection engine, when you have networks, and when you have technology that works on APIs that connect with each other to best of breed, clients are going to basically look for integration and navigation between best of breed. They are not going to basically look for integration of pools of mediocrity. And unless holding companies can go from integrating pools of mediocrity to integrating and navigating best of breed, there should be no reason for a holding company or a sub-holding company like VivaKi. On the other hand, if you can quickly allocate best of breed, and no one company can do it all, with the next line of our strategy, which is we have to upgrade, share, and borrow. Upgrade means we either have to build or co-create with other people things that we need to have in-house, or work very closely with people which we need to sort of build in-house. And there are certain things that we need to do. We need to be able to basically strategically think across the spectrum, because if we don't, we won't keep a particular path. We need certain analytic skills. We need to be able to generate ideas with other people, because otherwise there's no reason for our business. But it doesn't have to be only our ideas. We can get it and work with a lot of other people. Borrow. We're forcing each one of our companies to scale down to their centers of excellence. What can you tell us that you believe that you can do world class? If not, get the hell out of that business. And borrow from each other, borrow from outside. And shared, there are certain resources that need to be shared. You know, today, our VivaKi Nerve Center is already the 4th largest sort of media pool in the world, after Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, who are our partners. Because we can share across all of our companies. If you've got $70 billion going through all of these things, you have all the technology, you should be able to share. You can have platforms and backbones. So we're doing all of that, which on most good days allows us to do pretty remarkable. And if you've sort of seen the Publicis results, it's pretty much all driven by VivaKi. Okay, at a very large scale, companies that grow at 7-8% organically, when we grow at double digits, we grow double digits in supposedly a non-growth segment of massive billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar basis, because the strategy works, or hopes to work. Now let me tell you what's wrong. And what the real challenges of reworking and rethinking things. Here is challenge number 1. While the world is going digital, people are analog. What does that mean? It basically means that you and I have feelings. And among the feelings we have is we get threatened when somebody enters our turf. We get threatened when somebody basically says, prove to me you're world class. We get threatened when we have an entire system that incentivizes people on how many people report to them, how much client love that they get, and how much money they control. Because in effect, scale of control is linked to compensation. And now you're telling them, do less, partner more, and you are one cog in a wheel. Intellectually, it's a fantastic thought. Emotionally, it sucks. Now, I happen to think it's a cool thing even emotionally, but remember, I'm mentally insane. When I look around, we have to address that. How do we address that? We have to address it with incentive systems. We have to understand that with recognition. We have to do it with training. We have to do it with people coming and learning their own way, and that takes time. So the ideas that will be shared today, I completely believe in, even without knowing what they're going to be. What I do believe is it'll take a little more time than all of us think it's going to take. And the reason is because of the way people are, in organizations. So the ideas are right, the timing may be a little slower. So for all of you all who are in this business, watch your burn rate, is my advice. The second, so that's, one of the learnings. The second learning that we've had, besides people on analog and digital, is people really want to understand how this helps them on business metrics. So they'll get very excited, and then reality will dawn on them, which is tell us how this helps on business metrics. And there are some incredible business cases. Whether we've already seen one, Lego, but there are lots of business cases. And we have to basically share business cases. So what tends to happen is we have to look less and less like sort of a gathering commune of hippies, right? And more as the people who are not the people who are the Occupy people, but who are going to basically do this by taking over. We're not going to sit outside in a goddamn tent, right? My whole basic belief is we are going to kick him out and make him sit in the tent. That's the approach. The approach isn't that you are wrong. The approach is you are right, but we know how you can do it better. That's a very different approach, which is we can make you more money. If you are the 1%, we're going to make you the 0.1%. That's the strategy. Because the reality of it is there is nothing that has been taught to me from Charles Darwin which says people actually like being equal. If that was true, nobody would be even at this conference because we're trying to learn new things to get better. Okay, Darwinian economics and Darwinian behavior basically says people want to get better. They want to get 0.0001%. So any strategy that's against that doesn't work, not in a global world. Because if the Americans don't want to do it, I just came back from China, they're going to do it, thank you very much. And my Indian pals are waiting in the, in the stuff. I would like to sort of end by asking for help, since this is a crowd, not just it's reworking new ways of thinking. Here's the help that we need, which is quite deep. The first is we need education. And one of the key things is after this particular conference, I'm going to ask Sean and others if we can sort of repeat this for a lot of our people in probably New York, since a lot of people are in New York, and where I could eventually bring maybe 200-300 of our folks for a day, because they need to be illuminated. Because it's no use telling people that they don't know when they haven't even been shown how to know. So we need education, and we need two forms of education. One form of education is to do these kinds of stuff. The other is how do you do self-education, which is, if one thing I've learned from the Khan Academy is the biggest thing in the Khan Academy is the fact that you can learn at your own speed. And when people want to change, like when I learn, I don't want to go out of my way to make a fool of myself. So I do it 4:30 in the morning every day, just to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And so if I mess up, not too many people know. So we have to eventually provide modules, and self-education is go look at this example, go look at this website, go look at crowdsourcing.org, go look at this, okay? Learn, because people want to learn. So anybody who you think is like dumbass, they aren't dumbass. They really want to learn, but no one's showing them how to learn. So I would love to get from you all ways to help me learn, and therefore make my company learn. So that's the second one. The third one, and the last one, is how do we make this real? And that's, a lot of you all, like me, though I don't moonlight, I'm not allowed to on this, but are consultants. And it's a great idea to be in this world as a consultant, but what people really want to know, I'll tell you this, if you pivot your business, not into telling people how important this is, because that's about it's a 15-day assignment at most to explain to people how important this is and who the players are. The real long-term thing is, how do I do this? How do I make this real? T.S. Eliot, has this line, which is, between the idea and the reality falls the shadow. I think it won't be hard to sell the idea. As I'm working on the reality, oh my God, there's a big fat shadow. Okay, and we have to do this. There isn't like a if and not, because if we don't do this within our types of companies, we will sooner or later be irrelevant. It may be a little later because of people, taking time to change, but we will be irrelevant. So in that, we would probably need your help, which is why we constantly talk about these three futures. Number one future is the future does not fit in the containers of the past, which is we are all organized for today's world. The future does not fit in the mindsets of the past because we are incentivized, our brains are wired for a particular type of behavior, and we hate losing what we got to go leaping into some things that we don't want. And the third one, which I will insult all of you all, but it's not an insult because I believe I'm on the same side, is the future comes from the slime. And what the hell do I mean by the future comes from the slime? I'm not calling you all slime, but the future comes from the slime. A lot of times, people find me at the weirdest conferences, and this one isn't that weird. But, as I was letting Sean know, it's the first one. This is like, the first one of these, and I would not be surprised in 5-7 years, this would be like a TED-like conference. It's impossible to get into, and people have to be interviewed, to get into. And because new ideas and new thoughts don't start off like with some heavenly, stuff. So I'll give you an idea of where the future, and so when you all are occasionally somewhat troubled by what you all are doing, keep this in mind. No one paid attention to MS-DOS from Windows. They were talking about IBM. No one paid attention to Google. They only thought Microsoft was going to take over the world. Then Google was going to take over the world, and this randy guy called Mark Zuckerberg at Harvard came up with Facebook. Now people say Facebook is impossible to beat. My stuff is just you wait. Because everyone's looking at only these folks, and it's somebody somewhere, probably in South Africa or somewhere, who's coming up with some scheme that nobody knows. And the reason simply is slime can win because technology is the stone that allows David to take down Goliath. And what tends to happen is people who are starting with interesting and new and neat ideas tend to be on the fringes. But the time from going from the fringes to the main line is now getting faster and faster because of technology and because of loop speeds. And which is this whole idea of new ways of working, new ways of collaborating, new ways of creating ideas and distributing things is for real. And I'm really glad I could be at the first one of these. Thank you.